I am Maelis of the Eretion race, and I was sent to hunt a human named Rhys Calder. My people's high command believes him to be a danger to our sovereign rule of Veridex, the lush moon we claimed long ago for scientific research. Veridex is a world of impossible breadth, with canopies that stretch for kilometers, their vines weaving into citadels of emerald. I have long prided myself on being the galaxy's finest tracker. There is no pulse of life that goes undetected by my ocular implants, no hidden corner that escapes the rasp of my sense of smell, no slightest motion my ears cannot catch. Thus, when I landed on Veridex, I expected an easy hunt. Human or not, I have brought down quarry thrice as cunning. Yet, from the moment I stepped onto the cushioned moss outside my small drop ship, the jungle's vastness spoke of a different truth. The local vegetation, known in our records as Larave, parted before me in a hush of pale fronds, as though uncertain whether to greet or repel my presence. The thick, spicy aroma of the jungle enclosed my every step. Small creatures, four-legged, scaled, with wide, glowing eyes skittered along branches overhead, sending cascades of pollen drifting like powdered crystals. I had received his coordinates from my handler, Salir, who patched them through just hours before my drop. Commander Calder, an off-worlder from Earth, had apparently infiltrated the forbidden zone of Veridex by unknown means. Our satellites detected him near the Eastern Mists region. He had also destroyed a small outpost manned by Eretion scouts, leaving behind no survivors. The replays from security drones showed him fighting with a precision belying his race's rumored clumsiness. There he was, in his shredded fatigues, black hair plastered to his brow by the sweltering damp. He wielded Eretion pulse rifles looted from the scouts and used them with a horrifying mastery that rivaled even my own people's abilities. Though I hold no personal malice toward humans, I do my duty. My rank, that of an elite striker, obligates me to bring swift justice upon intruders. Humans have a reputation for unpredictability, cunning, and resourcefulness. I have never fought one in personal combat, but I have sparred with training droids modeled after their physiology. I know the approximate range of their reflexes. I know their potential for survival in harsh conditions. I was certain that, with my superior equipment, I could dispatch him easily, or so I thought. The coordinates led me deeper into the eastern mists, named for the swirling, silver-hued vapors that gather at dawn along the banks of enormous lotus lakes. I expected to find the remnants of his camp, or at least signs of his passage. Our satellites, though somewhat blinded by the thick canopy, pinpointed him with a margin of error of a few hundred meters. But upon arrival, all I found was a small scattering of footprints, barely recognizable in the damp soil. The prints showed a large boot size typical of a human adult male. They were spaced with a careful gait, as though he had been walking backwards, checking for pursuers. Before me, the canopy soared, so densely woven that only shards of pale light trickled through the leaves. Crouching low, I swept aside rotting fronds and found a tripwire. Connected to the wire was an improvised explosive, likely cobbled together from the very outpost he had destroyed. That was my first sign that Rhys Calder was no ordinary soldier. The device was small, placed in such a way that any inattentive tracker would find themselves littered across the vegetation. My heart pounded with excitement. A worthy hunt indeed, I thought. I disarmed the explosive with a deft twist of my gloved fingers, moving with care and grace. My sense of pride grew. If this human had taken the trouble to leave me a trap, then he suspected I was coming. My ears twitched slightly, scanning for the subtle hum of a cloaked presence. But the jungle's symphony remained unbroken, calls of avian predators, whispering leaves, the hum of insects. No human footsteps. Proceeding with caution, I pressed on. Above me, the branches formed a labyrinth. A kaleidoscope of vine-draped corridors shimmered with dew. Each tree trunk was thick enough that a humanoid form could easily conceal itself behind any of them. My tail, slender and covered in faint ivory scales, swished with nervous vigilance. My mother always taught me caution, especially on foreign worlds, but that caution was soon tested. A flicker of movement drew my attention to the right. I whirled, pulse pistol raised, but saw nothing, only the shimmering beams of faint sunlight. Another flicker, this time to the left. Behind a cluster of drooping vines, I crouched, scanning, sniffing the air. Again, nothing. No footprints. No broken branches. No footprints, only the quiet hush of breathless vegetation. I whispered into my comm. Salir, are you reading any motion in my sector? Salir's voice crackled in my ear. No motion. The satellite is partially obstructed by the canopy. Careful. Maelis, Commander Calder is no fool. I stood for a moment, letting the tension pass. This was the game he wanted. I realized. Fear. A mental chase to unnerve me. To make me reveal weaknesses. Perhaps he was near. Perhaps not. Letting out a slow breath, I advanced once more. For a day and a night, I moved in wide arcs, searching for new signs of him. My supplies were minimal enough rations for a few days, so I had to find him quickly. I discovered faint remnants of a fire pit, a few footprints in the marshy ground, and another hidden trap that I narrowly avoided. Every step told me that he was leading me on a path of his choosing. I ended my first day's search near a place called the Salamander Ridge. A jagged cliff overshadowed a narrow ravine, and at its crest lay a natural vantage point from which one could see half the jungle from east to west. As dusk fell, the sky above turned the color of blood mixed with violet, the twin suns of this system dropping below the horizon. My silhouette cast a stretched outline against the rock. The heat of the day receded. The alien moon's night sounds, thrumming and mysterious, replaced the calling of day creatures. I made a small camp, placing motion sensors in a circle. I ate a standard ration, a bland paste that provided essential nutrients, but did little to satisfy my hunger for real food. My eyes scanned the gloom, aided by my ocular enhancements, which offered me clarity in low light. The vines below, the canopy overhead, all glowed faintly in the thermal scope. Each time an animal scurried past, I checked if it might be a disguised human, but all were mere beasts, roaming in search of sustenance. As darkness claimed the forest, I lay in uneasy sleep, every muscle tensed, certain that I was being watched. When the dawn broke, it was accompanied by a thick, rolling fog, drifting across the ridge and seeping through the trees. My sensors had detected no intruders in the night, yet I could not shake the feeling that he had been near, observing my every move. The hunt had begun in earnest, and I sensed that Calder had no fear of the chase. Instead, it seemed he reveled in leading me further and further from my extraction point. He was turning the jungle into a trap, a place where I might soon lose the advantage. But I refused to be deterred. This hunt, after all, was the purpose of my existence. I would find him, and I would finish what he had started. Day 2 on Veridex began with a silent descent down the ridge. The pathways were slick from the night's condensation, the larav leaves gleaming like polished emerald scales. My senses stayed on high alert. Each step I took was measured, and I carried my rifle at the ready. The vantage from the ridge had revealed no traces of Calder, but I knew he was somewhere below, likely in the densest part of the jungle, where our satellites could scarcely detect movement. The undergrowth beneath the ridge was dense. Towering trunk like vines formed natural tunnels, and broad leaves rustled with every shift of the warm breeze. I found more tracks, half footprints in the saturated soil, pressed deep as though carrying significant weight. In one place, the mud was scattered with shards of metal plating, likely from a piece of Aretian armor. I picked up one of the shards, noting faint scorch marks along its edge. Had he fought someone else here? Or perhaps he salvaged gear from our scout's outpost and replaced some of his own tattered equipment. That was not a comforting thought. The more gear he possessed, the more dangerous he became. Pressing forward, I soon uncovered more clues. Broken branches hung in disarray. Deep scores in the bark indicated a bladed weapon. Could the human have used an Aretian energy knife? The slices, smooth and evenly spaced, suggested so. I reached out, touching the bark. The cuts were fresh, the residue still visible. He might have passed through here mere hours ago. My pulse quickened. The jungle around me grew louder. The deeper I went, choruses of insects, calls of large, reptilian creatures that lurked in the watery pools, and the occasional roar of some unseen predator. My training taught me to blend in, to become part of the environment, and so I moved quietly, stepping over rotting logs, weaving between vines without disturbing them. Yet even with my skill, the place felt oppressive. The air was so thick with humidity that each breath felt like drawing in warm liquid. My scales itched, longing for a drier climate. Then, near a copse of twisted trees, I found something unexpected, a partial canteen made of human design, stamped with the insignia of the Terran Colonial Defense Force, Calder's force. Inside, a bit of stale water remained. The canteen had been tossed aside in haste. Next to it, the remnants of a small cooking kit lay scattered, as though the user had no time to retrieve them. My mind whirled with possibilities. Was he fleeing from me, or from something else? The day wore on, and I tracked him relentlessly. Whenever I found footprints, I marked them on my visor's map interface. Each sign only led me to more questions. His route seemed almost random at times, doubling back or leading me in circles. Yet my instincts insisted there was a method to the madness he was guiding me. But to where? Around midday, I paused to rest on a moss-covered ledge, overlooking a shallow canyon. The canyon's mouth stretched for kilometers, filled with luminescent flora. Great spires of pale rock jutted from the earth, forming a labyrinth of natural pathways. As I scanned from above, I glimpsed a silhouette far in the distance, darting between boulders. My heart leaped. Without hesitation, I hurried down the ledge, silent as a creeping cat. The silhouette was gone by the time I reached the canyon floor, but I was certain it was human. The footprints confirmed it. His pace was swift, but not panicked. He knew exactly where he was going, and I suspected he might be luring me deeper, or perhaps leading me to a place where he could stage an ambush. Either way, I refused to let him slip away. I pursued him through the canyon, searching every bend. The place was a labyrinth indeed. Towers of rock soared to block out the sun, casting the canyon floor in an eerie twilight. The luminescent plants glowed a gentle purple, painting the rocks in shimmering patterns. Giant centipede-like creatures slithered beneath the stones, occasionally clicking their spiny legs. I passed them by, ignoring their alien stares. At last, I reached the far side of the canyon and found no further sign of him. Frustration mounted. How could he vanish so completely? My gaze swept across the rocky expanse. Vertical walls soared, and I caught sight of something that made my throat tighten rope, or a vine that had been used as a climbing aid, dangling from a hidden crevice high above. Clever. He'd scaled the wall, leaving footprints below as a decoy. then pulled himself up out of reach. My rifle scope traced along the vines, but he was gone, nowhere to be seen. I considered following him, but the rock face seemed perilous, and he likely set more traps. With my grappling hook, I could attempt to ascend, but my instincts suggested caution. Instead, I circled around, searching for a more gradual path upward. The rocky labyrinth soon gave way to dense vegetation again, and after hours of fruitless searching, the day's light began to fade. That night, I made camp within a small alcove formed by curved roots of an enormous tree. The air smelled of loam and decaying leaves. My sensors, once again, detected no intruders. But I doubted Calder was far. He wanted me to keep chasing him, and he wanted me tired, uneasy, always on the alert. Judging by the cunning trap placements, the false trails, and the vantage points he'd taken, he must be an experienced soldier or scout, possibly from Earth's special forces. The question lingered, why was he here? As I tried to rest, my mind wandered to rumors I'd heard about humans. Brave to the point of recklessness, masters of improvisation, capable of forging lethal weapons from scraps. The more I considered his cunning, the more I realized I needed a different tactic. Simply tracking him might never bring me face to face with him. Instead, I had to think like him, anticipate the next move, and use the environment as cunningly as he did. When morning arrived, I woke early, determined to set my own trap. If I could appear predictable, maybe he would seek the advantage, and if I disguised my sensors, I might corner him. Once captured, I could deliver him back to high command, though a small voice in the back of my mind whispered, "Will it really be that simple?" Something about Calder's presence here felt deeper. He was not merely a rogue soldier. There was a purpose behind his infiltration. Perhaps it involved that rumor of a black site facility on Veridex, an abandoned outpost from a past war. My superiors denied any knowledge, but rumors persisted. Driven by my curiosity, I pressed on. The jungle seemed to watch me, each rustling leaf a subtle mockery of my attempts. He was out there, weaving the forest into his personal web. But I, too, had my craft. This human would soon learn that an Aretian elite striker was not so easily cornered. By the third morning, the heat had intensified, draping Veridex in a suffocating haze. Visibility in the early hours was limited. As thick fog rolled through the trees, water dripped from leaves in a steady rhythm, echoing like a slow, steady drumbeat. I moved quietly, my senses extended in all directions. The day before, I had left subtle clues of my path, fake footprints. A small piece of Aretian armor, accidentally, dropped, and a deliberately scuffed trunk. My hope was that Calder would investigate these signs, perhaps letting his guard down. I had chosen a vantage point, a tall, sturdy tree, hollowed at the trunk. Inside, I could hide, letting my sensors do most of the work. Several motion-triggered drones, small as insects, hovered around, ready to beep softly in my comm if they detected movement. Should Calder approach, I would spring from my hiding place. It was, in essence, a mirror of the tactic he had been using on me. Hours passed. The stench of the hollow was thick with fungus and decaying wood. I fought the urge to cough, determined not to give myself away with any sound. As the suns rose higher, beams of shimmering light cut through the foliage in angled streaks. My stomach growled, but I focused on the hunt, ignoring the dull ache of hunger. Then, at last, my drones beeped. Movement had been detected to the west, near the scuffed trunk I had left behind as a decoy. I steadied my breathing, listening. The drone feed in my visor showed a grainy, partially obstructed image, something humanoid crouched near the trunk. examining the fake footprints. My heart leaped. At last. The figure was tall, wearing a ragged uniform. The feed was too blurry to confirm the face, but I was almost certain it was Calder. My pulse raced as I prepared to pounce. I reminded myself to remain calm, to let him move closer, perhaps to a clearing where I could confront him openly. Time stretched. My arm muscles began to cramp from holding the rifle at the ready. Then, with a hiss of frustration, I realized the figure was moving away. Now or never. I slipped from the hollow and dropped silently to the forest floor. My boots landed with the faintest crunch of damp undergrowth. In the distance, behind a veil of leaves, I saw a silhouette dart to the right. I sprang after it, weaving between vines, my rifle's muzzle leading the way. He moved swiftly, but I managed to keep pace. Leaves and branches whipped at my face as I sprinted, each footfall sending up a spray of moist soil. Gradually, I closed the distance. For a moment, I glimpsed him fully, lean, muscular arms, uniform torn at the sleeves, a cut across his left forearm. He carried a sleek Areshan pulse rifle, and I could see the tension in his posture. This was no ordinary foot soldier. I shouted, "Commander Calder, surrender. I won't warn you again." My voice echoed through the foliage. He paused, half turning his head. I saw his profile, pale skin, dark hair, sharp eyes that glimmered with determination or defiance. Then he ducked behind a large root, firing a single pulse shot in my direction. I threw myself sideways, feeling the scorching bolt pass just above my shoulder. My heart hammered. He was not about to go quietly, keeping low. I returned fire, sending a volley of crackling energy into the root's bulk. Bark and splinters exploded in a shower of debris. Cautiously, I circled around, hoping to flank him. For a moment, I heard nothing but the thunder of my own breathing. Then he popped up, unleashing another barrage. One shot grazed the armor on my upper arm, scorching it and sending a jolt of pain through my nerves. I bit back a cry, adrenaline surging. My ocular enhancements let me track the bolt's origin. I pivoted, pressing myself against a wide trunk. The pulses sizzled overhead, carving deep gouges into the wood. The acrid smell of scorched bark filled the air. He was pinned, but I was, too. If I tried to rush him, he might land a killing shot. If I stayed put, he might slip away again. Summoning my courage, I edged around the trunk, returning fire in short bursts. My aim was precise, each shot forcing him to take cover. Step by careful step, I advanced. At last, I heard a sudden break in his fire. His rifle must have overheated or jammed. This was my chance. I lunged forward, crossing the open space in a flash, rifle raised. He stood, weapon in hand but inert, cursing as he smacked it in frustration. We locked eyes. His steel-gray gaze met my amber one, and in that split second, I saw something more than fear or hostility. There was intelligence, calculation, and a strange flicker of regret. Before I could fire, he swung the butt of his rifle at me. I ducked, feeling the rush of air as the weapon whooshed past my crest of horns. My tail whipped around, aiming to sweep his legs, but he leaped backward with impressive reflexes. He lunged again, this time landing a solid punch to my side, knocking the breath from my lungs. I staggered, disoriented by the closeness of him. Humans, I recalled, can be deceptively strong. We grappled, exchanging blows amidst the tangled roots. He tried to wrest my rifle from me, but I twisted away. I caught the briefest look at his face up close, lined with fatigue, streaked with dirt and sweat, yet resolute. In that moment, I nearly admired him, though the thought vanished as quickly as it came. Summoning my Areshan strength, I kneed him in the stomach, causing him to double over. He twisted free, grabbing a fallen branch to block my next strike. I fired a shot, missing by a fraction as he rolled behind a trunk. He vanished once again into the forest gloom. I let out a guttural growl, frustration boiling in my veins. The entire chase had lasted only minutes, but it felt like an eternity. My side ached from his blow. My heart thundered. The taste of iron lingered in my mouth. So close. I had almost had him in my sights. Panting, I sank to one knee, scanning the dense undergrowth. He had vanished into the green again, leaving me alone with the drifting spores and the sizzling scorch marks. My comm crackled with Salir's voice. Maelis, status. Lost him. Again, I hissed. But I made contact. He won't escape me next time. A pause. We're registering unusual atmospheric fluctuations near your coordinates. Be advised there could be a storm coming, or some local phenomenon. Keep watch. I exhaled, trying to steady myself. If a storm was brewing, it would complicate matters further. Veridex storms could be brutal sheets of acidic rain, swirling winds that could uproot trees. The jungle was treacherous even in calm weather. In the midst of a storm, it might become outright lethal. Standing up, I examined the ground where Calder had been. Footprints scuffled in the mud, droplets of blood from some minor wound. My enhanced sense of smell picked up the coppery tang. So he was hurt. That might slow him down. But I had also taken a hit. My armor scorched, and the wound on my side throbbed where he'd struck me. Despite the pain, I felt a spark of triumph. This was no longer an abstract mission, this was personal. I'd looked into his eyes. He was cunning, strong, and desperate. But I was an elite striker. I would not fail. Adjusting my rifle's settings, I steeled myself, determined to finish what I had begun. Yet a strange, nagging doubt whispered, what if he's not the real enemy? I ignored the doubt. For now, Calder was my target. Whatever shadows lurked behind his presence, I would discover them later. I resumed the hunt. My resolve hardened. My eyes on the shifting green depths of Veridex's jungle, where the human soldier moved like a ghost, leaving subtle traps in his wake. By midday, the sky had darkened. Jagged clouds loomed overhead, tinged a sickly green by the twin suns' refracted light. The atmospheric pressure dropped, sending a dull ache through my ears, and the humidity spiked. My visor flickered with warnings of an incoming storm. Acidic precipitation was a known hazard here, capable of burning through unprotected skin in minutes. My Eretion armor was built to withstand some of it, but I still had to find shelter before the worst of it hit. As I hurried through the thick underbrush, I considered my next move. The partial encounter with Calder had given me valuable information about his fighting style. He favored quick strikes, using cover to his advantage, and he was adept at reading my movements. I needed to outwit him. If the storm came, it might offer both of us an opportunity or a threat. Perhaps I could use the chaos to corner him. The forest shifted around me as the winds picked up. Leaves rustled in agitation, forming eddies of swirling detritus. Lightning flickered in the distance, casting momentary arcs of brilliance across the emerald gloom. A low rumble of thunder vibrated the ground beneath my feet. In search of shelter, I followed the traces of older trails, cut by some large beast. Gaps in the canopy revealed thick, rolling clouds. Soon, the first stinging droplets of acidic rain began to fall. My visor displayed an alert, surface acidity level rising. Shelter required. I gritted my teeth, scanning for caves, overhangs, or any structure that might shield me from the deluge. At last, I found a rocky outcropping near the edge of a wide ravine. Beneath the outcropping was a shallow cave, partially hidden by a curtain of vines. I slipped inside just as the skies opened in earnest, unleashing a downpour that hissed against the rocks and leaves. I could smell the acrid tang in the air as the vegetation began to sizzle. The cave was small, damp, and smelled of old rot, but it would have to do. Settling into a corner, I set up a small drone at the cave's entrance to alert me of any intruders. The drone hovered in place, silent except for a faint hum. I removed my helmet to check the scorch on my arm. The armor plating had taken most of the damage, but a faint black line marred my scales beneath. The blow to my side was sore, but no bones were broken. I attempted to patch it with a med gel from my kit, wincing as the antiseptic stung. Rain pattered on the stone outside, growing heavier by the minute. Flashes of lightning illuminated the cave intermittently. This forced pause gave me time to reflect. My thoughts turned back to the rumors about the black site facility, hidden on Veridex. If Calder was truly here to infiltrate that place, then he might be heading toward it even now. Why, though, would a human risk so much to break into an Eretion facility? Perhaps it contained advanced technology or scientific data about the rare flora that covered this moon data that Earth's colonial defense might want. Or maybe he was after something else entirely. A flicker of memory surfaced on my homeworld. I once met an older Eretion soldier who claimed that Veridex was used by our ancestors not just for research, but for secret weapons development. He spoke of hidden labs where dangerous experiments took place, abominations that threatened entire star systems. It sounded like wild conjecture back then, but now, with Calder's presence, I could not dismiss the possibility so easily. I shut my eyes, leaning against the cool rock. The storm's roar lulled me into a half-sleep. At some point, I thought I heard footsteps, and my eyes snapped open. The drone was silent. Likely the sound was just the echo of thunder or an animal scurrying nearby. My senses were on edge, fatigue tugging at me. Eventually, I drifted into a restless doze. When I woke, the storm had eased to a mild drizzle. The acrid smell lingered, and steam rose in wispy trails from the soaked ground outside. The drone's readout indicated no intrusions, so I ventured out cautiously. The forest beyond the ravine looked battered, leaves riddled with holes where the acidic raindrops had fallen. Streams of discolored water trickled between the roots, forming shallow pools. I redonned my helmet and stepped into the open, scanning for new footprints. Acidic rains tend to wash away traces, but the ground was so saturated that any recent movement could still leave impressions in the mud. I moved along the ravine's edge, finding a precarious path that wound downward. Perhaps Calder, too, sought shelter here. If so, I might intercept him. Descending into the ravine, I noted the scorched flora. The carnivorous vines that once coiled around branches lay limply. In places, the soil steamed. The path grew narrower until I had to sidestep carefully to avoid sliding into the rocky chasm below. Halfway down, I paused. A faint trail of footprints marked the mud. My visor's scan confirmed they were human-sized and relatively fresh. Calder. A surge of excitement flared. I followed the trail with renewed vigor, my rifle close at hand. The prints led deeper into the ravine's winding corridor. Mossy rocks, slick with the residue of acid, threatened my footing. I had to move slowly, but my keen eyes locked onto every detail. A scuff mark here, a partial handprint on a mossy boulder there. The ravine twisted and turned, eventually opening into a sheltered clearing filled with towering fungal growths, each the height of a building. Their caps glowed with phosphorescent patterns. Beneath one such fungus lay a small, Smoldering fire pit, a ring of blackened stones. Embers still faintly glowing. No sign of Calder. But he must have been here not long ago. I crept toward the fire pit, scanning for traps. This was too obvious a sight, too easy. Sure enough, a glint of metal caught my eye in the fungus's shadow. Another tripwire. I deactivated it with practiced swiftness. My adrenaline spiking at the realization. Every step had to be wary. Every movement scrutinized. He was always one step ahead, or so it seemed. Yet something strange caught my attention. The remains of a data pad, partially melted by acid, lay discarded near the fire pit. Carefully, I picked it up, wiping away the ash. The device was Terran, battered beyond easy repair, but its design was definitely not standard soldier issue. This was more like a scientific data pad, used for scanning and collecting information. Whatever it contained was likely lost, but the fact that Calder carried it reinforced my suspicion. This was not a simple infiltration. He was gathering something, maybe evidence, maybe data about the facility, if it existed. A noise behind me made me spin around, rifle raised. But it was only a bird-like creature, flitting between the giant fungi. I exhaled, the tension in my shoulders easing slightly. My comm crackled again with Salir's voice. "Maelis, do you copy?" "I'm here," I murmured. "High Command has new orders. If Commander Calder cannot be subdued quickly, destroy him at all costs. We cannot afford a breach." I felt a pang of frustration. "I'm doing my best," I replied. "He's good. Better than anticipated." Salir's voice softened. "We know. Reinforcements are en route, but it may take 2 days. Our main vessel encountered a technical issue. You're on your own until then." "Understood." I closed the channel, swallowing my annoyance. Reinforcements might tip the balance, but I resented the implication that I needed them. I wanted this hunt to end on my terms. As I turned to continue my search, a sudden crack echoed through the clearing, accompanied by a burst of motion. A shot whizzed past me, striking the base of a fungal stalk. I dove behind the nearest trunk, heart pounding. He was here, my visor's HUD whirred, scanning for his heat signature. But the residual heat from the acid rain and the fungal glows distorted the reading. He fired again, the bolt slamming into the trunk behind me, sending shards of glowing fungus drifting through the air. I could hear him moving, but the echoes in the ravine made it hard to pinpoint his exact position. Gritting my teeth, I returned fire blindly, hoping to keep him pinned down. My shots illuminated the clearing in brief flashes. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the shooting stopped. Silence descended, broken only by the dripping of acid-laced water. I strained my ears, searching for movement, but he'd slipped away again. I cursed under my breath. This was more than a game of cat and mouse. It was a clash of wills, each of us refusing to concede ground. Shifting my vantage, I scanned the clearing again, searching for a sign. Had he ascended the ravine's walls, or retreated into one of the many dark crevices beneath the fungal caps? The possibilities were endless. The tension coiled in my muscles, an electric current of determination. I approached the spot from where he'd likely fired, carefully surveying the ground for footprints or blood spatter. Nothing. Whatever advantage I'd had by discovering his camp was gone. He'd used it against me, forcing me into a defensive posture. Still, I had the data pad, albeit damaged. It was a clue perhaps it held the key to unraveling his true mission. We were dancing around each other in this endless green labyrinth, testing each other's resolve. Yet a tiny voice in my mind whispered again, "Is he truly your enemy, or just another pawn in a larger game?" The question lingered as I pressed on, silent, resolute, determined to see this hunt through to the end. As night fell once more, the humidity lessened slightly, replaced by a biting chill that slithered through the trees. I continued my pursuit, following faint tracks that led ever deeper into Veridex's alien wilderness. My body ached, my wounds stinging. The acidic rain had subsided, but the forest floor remained slick. Each step a careful negotiation between footing and potential traps. Above me, the canopy was alive with glowing spores, drifting like tiny stars in the darkness. An almost eerie beauty pervaded this moon, a mingling of danger and wonder. I paused beneath a large, gnarled root that curved overhead like an archway, checking my bearings. The neural map on my visor displayed a wending path behind me, marking every place I'd been, every footprint or clue discovered. Yet the path ahead remained uncertain, uncharted. I was tempted to call Salir again, to request an update on reinforcements. But a part of me resisted. I wanted to face Calder on my own terms. This was my hunt, my test. If I failed, the reinforcements would do the job, destroying him without hesitation. Pride warred with practicality. If he truly knew something about a black site, capturing him alive might be more valuable than simply killing him. A sudden snap of a twig made me spin around, rifle lifted. My visor scanned the darkness, picking up no movement. My breath came in shallow spurts. The forest was turning me into a creature of constant vigilance. My nerves raw, my reflexes taut. Another twig snapped, this time off to the left. I crouched, heart pounding. A voice whispered from the shadows, low but unmistakably human. I didn't come here to kill your people, Oreshan. My eyes widened. The voice was close, yet I saw no form, no reflection of eyes. Cautiously, I answered. Then why did you slaughter the outpost? A pause. They attacked me on sight. I had no choice. I clenched my jaw. Surrender. We can discuss this under terms. A scoff. Your high command would rather see me dead than talk. But maybe we can find a compromise. I'm not looking to die in this damned jungle. I listened carefully for any sign of movement but heard none. My rifle trembled slightly in my grip. Was he trying to lure me into lowering my guard? Or did he truly want a truce? I decided to gamble. Speak quickly, I said, maintaining a defensive stance. I'm not here to play games. Silence stretched, broken only by distant night creatures. Finally, the voice came again, calmer. We need neutral ground, a place we can meet without shooting each other. You know the northern ridge. My visor map flickered. The northern ridge was several kilometers away, a high vantage point overshadowing a series of waterfalls. I weighed the risk. It could be a trap. But then, so could anything else on this forsaken moon. All right, I said, forcing confidence into my tone. Dawn, at the ridge. Come alone. I heard a faint exhale, like a reluctant acceptance. Agreed. No snipers, no drones. You try to set a trap, and I vanish again. Understood. Understood. I hesitated. But if you betray me, he cut me off. Voice edged with tension. I know. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. A rustling of leaves indicated he was moving away. I remained still for several minutes, rifle trained on the darkness, but there was no further sound. Eventually, the forest's ambient murmurs resumed their steady chorus. My mind spun. Why would he offer a meeting? Perhaps he was injured or running out of resources. Maybe he believed he could negotiate with me, or manipulate me in some way. I considered ignoring his suggestion, continuing the hunt on my own terms. But my curiosity burned. I needed answers about the black site, about his mission, about the data pad. Reluctantly, I decided to take the chance. If he truly sought a conversation, I would hear him out. If it was a ploy, I would bring him down. One way or another, this chase needed resolution. The swirling uncertainties had begun to gnaw at me. I moved carefully through the night, finding shelter beneath a sprawling tree with buttress roots. There I set up a minimal perimeter of sensors. Sleep was fitful, haunted by dreams of faceless humans, storms of acid, and data pads that leaked ominous secrets. My tail twitched with every drifting sound, and I woke multiple times, scanning the gloom for signs of betrayal. Morning arrived in a burst of color: pale pinks, blues, and golds reflected off the moist leaves. I ate a ration bar, ignoring its rubbery taste. Then began the journey to the northern ridge. The route was rugged. I had to navigate around sinkholes filled with pungent, sulfurous water. Steep slopes forced me to use my grappling hook. Vines threatened to ensnare me at every turn, but my determination drove me on. By midday, I reached the base of the ridge, a towering structure of layered rock, partially covered by thick creepers. My visor's altitude reading suggested a climb of nearly 200 meters. Just as I prepared to ascend, a faint beep on my visor indicated the presence of a motion sensor, a device not of my own. I scanned the area and found a small sensor attached to a boulder, half buried. Calder's, no doubt. He was watching for an ambush. So far, I was alone, as promised. I ascended the ridge with deliberate slowness, wary of booby traps. Twice, I found small tripwires, which I carefully disarmed. At last, I reached a relatively flat plateau near the summit. The view was breathtaking, a sea of emerald treetops stretching into the horizon. Bathed in the golden rays of afternoon sunlight, gentle waterfalls cascaded down from higher cliffs, pooling into clear basins that sparkled in the light. Mist rose from the water, forming tiny rainbows in the air. There, near the edge of the plateau, I spotted him. Rhys Calder stood with his back to me, arms folded, gazing out over the verdant expanse. He wore ragged fatigues, boots caked in mud. Bandages wrapped his left forearm. His rifle was slung across his back in a gesture of truce, though I suspected he could draw it fast if needed. I approached slowly, rifle lowered, but ready. He heard my footsteps, turning to face me. His expression was guarded, his eyes flicking to my weapon. Up close, I saw the toll. The jungle had taken on him, scratches on his cheeks, a bruise on his jaw, a weariness in his stance. Yet a certain strength remained in the set of his shoulders. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The wind rustled through the vines clinging to the ridge, carrying the distant roar of the waterfalls. Finally, I broke the silence. Why call for a meeting? Calder. He studied me, as though weighing how much to reveal. Because we're wasting time trying to kill each other, he said, voice steady but weary. I have a mission, one that might save billions of lives. But I can't complete it if I'm constantly looking over my shoulder for you. I narrowed my eyes. You're on an unauthorized infiltration mission, trespassing on an Eretion-controlled moon. You destroyed an outpost. Why should I believe any talk of saving lives? A flicker of pain crossed his face. I can't change what happened at the outpost. They fired on me first. I defended myself. Look, I'm not here to destroy your people, but there's something beneath these trees, something that can't be unleashed. My heart skipped. You mean the black site? He exhaled, glancing over the jungle. So you do know. I tensed. I've heard rumors, but High Command denies its existence. He laughed bitterly. Of course they do. It was an Eretion operation decades ago, kept secret even from most of your own. My intel suggests they were developing a bioweapon derived from Veridex's native flora, something unbelievably lethal. The project was supposedly mothballed, but Earth's intelligence got wind that it might be reactivated. If that weapon is unleashed, It could spark a galactic war. I'm here to make sure that never happens. My mind reeled. Part of me wanted to dismiss his claims as human propaganda. Yet something in his voice, his urgency, his conviction made me pause. A wave of doubt about my own superiors washed over me. "And how do you plan to stop it?" I asked, voice low. He ran a hand through his sweat-damp hair. "I have data on the facility's location and the weapon's failsafe. If I can get inside, trigger a meltdown of the core systems, it'll render the bioweapon inert. That's why I took the data pad from the outpost. I was extracting coordinates and override codes. I thought of the battered data pad I had found near his camp. I have a piece of that data pad. It's nearly destroyed." His eyes brightened with sudden hope. "If anything remains of the chip inside, I can salvage it. That chip has the final override I need." I glanced at the horizon, mind racing. High Command had ordered me to kill him. Yet if what he said was true, and if the black site existed, then perhaps the real threat was the weapon itself. The conflict inside me burned. My duty demanded obedience, but my conscience whispered otherwise. Finally, I sighed, raising my gaze to meet his. "Show me the proof. If it's real, and if you're telling the truth, I'll help you. But if I sense you're deceiving me, I'll finish this hunt right here." He nodded solemnly. "Deal." A shaky alliance was formed in that moment, high atop the ridge. We stood in tense silence, neither trusting the other entirely, yet bound by the possibility that a greater threat loomed beneath the jungle's depths. Only time would tell if this precarious truce would hold, or if we would turn on each other when the moment was right. We descended the ridge together, an odd pair bound by fragile accords. My every instinct screamed to watch his hands, to keep him in my peripheral vision at all times. He too seemed wary, occasionally glancing over his shoulder to ensure I wasn't aiming my rifle at his back. The atmosphere was heavy with distrust, yet overshadowed by a faint glimmer of cooperation. Calder carried a small pack slung over one shoulder, containing the remains of the data pad. We'd agreed to find a safer location, some place to attempt repairs on the chip. Acid storms threatened unpredictably, and the labyrinth of vines offered little respite. We needed a proper hideout. He led the way to a place he claimed to have discovered earlier, a dried-out watercourse beneath a cluster of enormous roots. The route was treacherous, forcing us to navigate slippery stone corridors. The walls adorned with phosphorescent moss that glowed a gentle blue. Stalactite-like formations dripped mineral-rich water, forming pools that shimmered in the half-light. Though my senses told me this area might be home to predatory creatures, Calder assured me it was relatively safe. "I used this as a shelter during the last storm," he explained. "No major predators, at least not that I've seen." I regarded him skeptically. "And if you're wrong?" He gave a humorless shrug. "Then I guess we'll fight side by side a bit sooner than expected." Our footsteps echoed in the watery passageway. Part of me couldn't believe I was traveling with a human, the very man I was sent to kill. But the black site rumor hung over us, an unspoken menace that dwarfed our personal quarrel. I recalled the small details, the hidden labs, the potential for a devastating bioweapon. Could it truly be real? At length, we found a natural chamber where the watercourse opened into a wider expanse, partially illuminated by sunlight that filtered through cracks in the rocky ceiling. Large roots dangled like pillars, forming a woven canopy overhead. The ground was dry enough to spread out a few supplies. Calder settled against a wall, wincing as he shifted his injured arm. I kept watch, standing near the entrance with my rifle in hand. After a tense pause, I cleared my throat. "Let me see your wound. A minor infection could slow you down. And if we're working together, I need you functional. He studied me warily but eventually nodded, removing the makeshift bandage. He revealed a bloody gash. Carefully, I applied some of my eretion med gel, the same type I'd used on my side. He hissed through clenched teeth at the sting, but soon the gel began to soothe the open skin. Thank you, he muttered, his voice subdued. I didn't expect compassion from your kind. I bristled. I'm not showing compassion, just practicality. A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Right. We fell into an uneasy silence. The drip of water echoed in the chamber as Calder rummaged in his pack, producing the damaged datapad. He carefully pried it open, exposing a circuit chip no larger than a coin. It was scorched around the edges, but possibly salvageable. He pulled out a small toolkit, muttering under his breath. If I can just bypass the burnt sections, maybe I can pull the override code. Takes about half an hour if we're lucky. I nodded and resumed my watch near the entrance. Tense minutes crawled by as he worked. Occasionally, he cursed under his breath or muttered about short circuits. Once, a loud snap of energy made him jerk back, shaking his fingers. I suppressed a smirk. Even in the face of galactic threats, a single jolt of electricity can remind us of our fragility. Finally, with a triumphant exhale, he said, I think I got it. He beckoned me closer, holding up the chip, now wired to a small interface device in his hand. The interface's screen flickered, displaying lines of code in a language I vaguely recognized as hybrid Terran Eretion. Let me see. I crouched beside him, scanning the lines. Indeed, the code was in part derived from Eretion cryptographic protocols. High Command insisted that these protocols were top secret, used only for the most classified projects. My gut tightened. This confirms it. You weren't lying about the facility. He nodded grimly. Coordinates put it north of here, beneath the Temple of the Ancients, your people's name. Not mine. Looks like it's accessible through a hidden elevator shaft. The override code should let me in. Then I can sabotage the core. A knot formed in my stomach. If this place is as dangerous as you claim, how do we ensure we don't unleash the weapon ourselves by tampering with it? His eyes darkened. That's what the override is for. A direct meltdown protocol to flood the entire complex with neutralizing agents. But we'll have to be quick. If your high command has any idea we're onto them, they might try to activate it first. The full weight of my choice fell upon me, not long ago. My only directive was to hunt this man. Now, I faced a decision that could pit me against my own superiors. If the facility truly exists, and they plan to reawaken it, that's treason at the highest level. Calder's gaze softened. Sometimes, the line between treason and heroism is decided by who writes the history books. Listen, I get that you're loyal to your people. But if we don't do something, it might be too late for all of us. I stared at the code, the damning proof in front of me. Memories of the elders in the High Command, their stern orders echoing through the polished corridors of our citadels. I'll help you, I said finally. But if I sense any betrayal, he held up a hand. No betrayal, I promise. Though my doubts lingered, I accepted his offer. We agreed to depart at first light the next day, giving him time to rest, and me time to gather my resolve. Night fell in an endless cascade of shadows, the watery chamber growing colder. We alternated watch, each sleeping fitfully. In the darkest hours, I awoke to the distant sound of thunder rolling over the forest, reminding me that Veridex was as volatile as the secrets it concealed. When dawn broke, pale beams of sunlight filtered through cracks in the chamber ceiling, illuminating the shimmering drips of water. Calder rose, wincing slightly as he tested his injured arm. The med gel had helped, and though he wasn't at full strength, He could at least hold a rifle. I checked my own wounds, still tender, but manageable. We packed our gear in tense silence. The feeling of traveling alongside a human still felt surreal, but my convictions, shaped by the revelations of that cryptic code, pressed me onward. We emerged from the root chamber, blinking in the hazy sunlight. Overhead, the canopies swayed in the morning breeze. "Coordinates suggest we head northeast," Calder said, consulting the interface device. "We might reach the site in 2 days if the terrain cooperates." I gave him a measured nod. "Lead the way. But remember, I'll be right behind you." He managed a weary grin. I wouldn't dare forget. Thus our journey began. 2 former adversaries trudging through the untamed jungle, guided by a single thread of purpose. A strange companionship formed in those first hours. Neither trust nor hostility, but a mutual understanding that we needed each other. For the moment, at least, that was enough. We traveled for nearly 2 days through Veridex's most forbidding territory. Acidic mudflats, great swarms of biting insects, and labyrinthine root systems all conspired to slow us. Several times we encountered predatory creatures, slithering serpentine beasts that attacked from the treetops, or swift, canine, like packs prowling the underbrush. Despite our mutual wariness, Calder and I fought side by side to drive them off. Our combined skills proved formidable, and slowly, a grudging respect formed. Conversation remained sparse. Trust was still a fragile thread, prone to fraying. Yet in the quieter moments, we exchanged brief details of our worlds. He spoke of Earth, its varied climates, its ancient cities. I shared tidbits about Eresha, its grand temples, its floating spires. We didn't dwell on these topics, but they eased the tension, reminding us that we were more than just soldier and hunter. At last, we reached the coordinates indicated by the data. Nestled within a valley of towering, twisted trees stood the Temple of the Ancients, an Ereshan structure built in an era shrouded by centuries. Moss and creepers draped its marble walls. Pillars carved with intricate patterns rose into the canopy, some broken by the relentless push of thick vines. The place exuded an aura of decay and mysticism. A wide set of steps, cracked and worn, led up to what appeared to be a ceremonial arch. Beyond it, massive doors of tarnished metal lay partially ajar. My visor detected minimal energy readings inside, though they were faint and sporadic. "So this is the temple," I murmured. "Didn't know it actually existed." Calder gave a low whistle. "Looks like something from a lost age. Hard to believe an underground lab might be hidden here." We approached with caution, weapons drawn. The large doors opened into a grand hall, lined with stone statues of ancient Ereshan figures, warriors, priests, and scholars, their faces obscured by centuries of erosion. Pale light filtered through gaps in the roof. At the far end of the hall stood an altar-like structure carved from black stone, etched with symbols I couldn't read. Our footsteps echoed ominously in the stillness. No wildlife stirred here, as though even the flora refused to trespass upon the temple's secrets. The air was stale, carrying a faint metallic tang. Calder consulted his interface, scanning for the hidden elevator shaft. "It should be beneath the altar. There's a service hatch or something similar." We circled the altar carefully. At first glance, the structure appeared solid, but upon closer inspection, I found a narrow crack running along its edge. Kneeling, I pressed a panel near the floor. A dull click echoed as the crack widened, revealing a concealed mechanism. "Here," I whispered. Calder helped me push the stone aside, revealing a metal hatch. Engraved upon the hatch's surface was the stylized crest of the old Ereshan Research Division, an emblem long since replaced by modern insignias. My pulse quickened. This was proof enough that the rumors were true. With a groan of disuse, the hatch lifted, exposing a dark shaft beneath. A faint draft of cool air wafted up, tinged with an acrid odor of chemicals. Calder shone a beam of light down the shaft, revealing a service ladder attached to the wall. Leading into the depths, he looked at me, eyes grim. "Ready," I nodded. Swallowing, despite my bravado, my heart pounded. The sense of stepping into something forbidden, something lethal, weighed heavily. But I had come too far to turn back now. We descended one by one, the shaft's confines pressing in, the metal rungs slippery with condensed moisture. Down, down, we climbed, the darkness swallowing us. At length, we reached the bottom, stepping onto a grated floor. The air here was still, suffused with the hum of distant machinery. My visor's night vision kicked in, revealing a corridor leading away from the ladder, lined with pipes and sealed doors. The walls were constructed of a once polished alloy, now corroded in places. I flicked on a small glow lamp, illuminating the corridor. "Which way?" I asked, voice hushed. Calder consulted his interface. "The main lab should be this way." He pointed to the right, where a corridor branched off. "The meltdown controls should be in the central chamber." We advanced, boots clanking on the metal floor, hearts pounding in sync. Occasionally, flickering emergency lights struggled to life, bathing sections of the hallway in pale, stuttering glow. Doors lined both sides, some sealed, others ajar. Through the open ones, we glimpsed abandoned labs' rusted equipment, shattered glass containers, defunct consoles coated in dust. I imagined the researchers who once walked these halls, forging secrets that could reshape galaxies. At an intersection, our path was blocked by a collapsed section of ceiling, twisted metal beams forming an impassable barrier. Calder cursed under his breath. "We'll have to find another route." We backtracked to a side corridor, stepping over debris and broken piping. A faint hissing sound caught my attention. Rounding a bend, I saw a crack in the wall, from which leaked a noxious vapor. My visor warned of toxicity. "Be careful," I said. "Toxic gas." My armor's filtration system should handle minor exposure, but we couldn't linger. Moving quickly, we found a door labeled Maintenance Access. It slid open with a groan, revealing a narrow passage. We slipped inside, half expecting the door to jam behind us. At the far end, another door. Calder hacked the control panel, entering the override code from the data chip. The door sputtered, then slid open, revealing a large domed chamber beyond. The chamber was dominated by a massive cylindrical reactor at its center, surrounded by catwalks and monitoring stations. Most of the lights were out, but occasional sparks danced along severed cables. Large glass tanks lined the walls, each containing dried remnants of vines and alien flora, mutated versions of Veridex plant life, suspended in a thick, viscous fluid that had long since evaporated. My stomach churned at the sight. This was no ordinary research. It looked like an attempt to engineer a living weapon. Calder stepped forward, scanning the reactor with his interface. "This is it. The meltdown controls are over there, on that terminal." He pointed to a raised platform near the central reactor, accessible by a narrow bridge. Once I input the override, it should flood the facility with a neutralizing agent, destroying any active pathogens or prototypes. A chill ran down my spine. "Do we know what state the weapon is in? Could it be alive?" He grimaced. "Let's hope not." We approached the platform cautiously. A half-functioning console hummed, its screen flickering. Calder plugged in the chip. Lines of code streamed across the display. I kept watch, scanning the chamber for movement. The quiet, dot combined with the flickers of light set my nerves on edge. Suddenly, the console emitted a shrill alarm. Calder cursed, frantically typing commands. System breach, someone's triggered the internal defenses. Before I could respond, a series of mechanical clanks echoed through the chamber. Turrets emerged from the ceiling, swiveling toward us. I barely had time to shout a warning before they opened fire. Energy bolts rained down, scorching the catwalk. "Run!" Calder yelled, diving behind a metal crate. I followed suit, heart hammering. One bolt seared past my helmet, leaving a blackened streak. I returned fire, but the turret's armor plating deflected most of my shots. Sparks flew as I tried to find an angle. Calder's voice came through the din. "We need to disable them manually. There should be a control node on the far side. Cover me!" Gritting my teeth, I laid down suppressive fire at the turrets, forcing them to focus on me. Calder sprinted across the chamber, ducking and weaving. The catwalk rattled with each impact, bits of metal falling. At last, he reached a small access panel and pried it open. I saw him fumbling with wires, his face twisted in concentration. One turret fired a high-intensity bolt that struck near my cover, sending me sprawling. Pain flared in my shoulder, clenching my jaw. I forced myself to stand, returning a volley of shots. My armor beeped a warning about structural integrity. If we didn't shut those turrets down soon, we'd be cut to ribbons. After an agonizing minute, the turrets suddenly froze, their barrels going limp. Calder exhaled in relief, emerging from behind the panel. The alarm ceased, leaving the chamber in a tense hush. I hurried over to him, my shoulder throbbing. "Nice work." He nodded, sweat glistening on his brow. "Let's hope that's the last of the security measures." He rushed back to the main console, continuing the meltdown sequence. The override code triggered a series of status screens, each blinking in red text. "We have to initiate the meltdown, then clear the area fast." I watched the progress bar climb on the console display. My visor buzzed with warnings about radiation and toxic spillage. The meltdown would neutralize the weapon, but the fallout could be catastrophic if we lingered. "How long do we have?" he grimaced. "Maybe 5. 10 minutes before the system floods the entire complex with chemical neutralizers and intense heat. Enough to kill us too." "Then let's move," I said, securing my rifle. "We'll find a route out. Fast." The moment he hit the final command, the reactor groaned, vents opening around the chamber. A deep rumble shuddered through the floor. Acrid fumes began to seep from valves. Sirens wailed, echoing through the corridors beyond. An automated voice in a Russian monotone repeated, "Containment breach in progress. Evacuate immediately." With hearts pounding, we ran. Smoke and fumes choked the corridors as we sprinted back the way we came. Overhead lights flickered erratically, casting disorienting shadows. The meltdown sequence unleashed swirling mists of neutralizing chemicals, hissing from every vent. My visor beeped incessantly, warning of high toxicity levels. A large chunk of ceiling collapsed ahead, forcing us to divert into an unexplored corridor. Sparks rained from torn wiring, and the floor vibrated with ominous tremors. My mind raced. Would the meltdown truly neutralize every trace of the bioweapon? Or was this entire facility about to become a crater of lethal chemicals? Perhaps both. We slid around a corner, stumbling upon a set of sealed blast doors. Calder hacked furiously at the control panel, only to find it offline. The entire system was shutting down. "We'll have to force it open," he muttered, eyeing the thick metal barrier. I activated a portable breaching charge, placing it carefully along the door's locking mechanism. "Stand back." Seconds later, it detonated with a deafening boom, the explosion reverberating through the corridor. The doors buckled inward, smoke billowing around us. Emerging into the next chamber, we found ourselves in what looked like a storage bay. Shelves of rusted containers lined the walls, some labeled with biohazard symbols. The meltdown alarm echoed, a constant drone that set my teeth on edge. Toxic fumes curled under the doors. Each breath felt hot, cloying. We hurried across the bay, searching for an exit. My visor detected a faint reading of an elevator shaft on the far side. There, I gasped, pointing. But as we approached, the door behind us slammed shut, and a figure stepped from the shadows, a tall Oreshan in dark armor, flanked by two heavily armed soldiers. I recognized the insignia on his pauldrons, an officer of the elite guard, outranking me, Captain Jathir. My heart sank. So High Command had sent more than just me to deal with Calder and to protect the secrets of this facility. The meltdown had clearly triggered their emergency protocols. Jathir's eyes flashed with cold fury. He regarded Calder, then turned to me. Maelis, you were ordered to eliminate this intruder, not aid him in an act of sabotage. I raised my rifle, uncertain. Sir, the weapon here posed a threat to the entire galaxy. I couldn't, he cut me off, his voice echoing with authority. Silence! You have betrayed your oath. Stand down, and perhaps the High Command will show leniency. My chest tightened. These were my people, my superiors. Yet behind them stood the monstrous sin of this place. I glanced at Calder, who gripped his weapon. His expression was grim, yet resolute. He whispered, "If we don't get out of here now, the meltdown will kill us all." Jathir's lips curled in a sneer. "We have override codes of our own. The meltdown can be delayed or reconfigured. All that matters is containing you two." He motioned for his soldiers to raise their rifles. "We will salvage the project, and your betrayal will be dealt with." A flood of horror and anger coursed through me. Even now, they wished to preserve the black site. My illusions of a moral high command shattered completely. No matter the cost, they intended to keep their weapon. The swirling chemicals and the thunder of the meltdown only underscored the madness of it all. I braced myself. Decision made. Lifting my rifle, I met Jathir's gaze. "I'm sorry, sir, but I cannot comply." His eyes flared with rage. "Then die for your treachery." A fierce firefight erupted in the confined space. Bolts of energy crisscrossed the storage bay, shattering containers and igniting chemical spills that burst into blue-green flames. I ducked behind a crate, returning fire at the elite guards. Calder moved in tandem with me, providing covering shots. Jathir's soldiers were highly trained, matching every move. One shot grazed my flank, the heat searing my side. Sparks rained from overhead lighting as we exchanged volleys. Crouching lower, I scanned for an advantage. The meltdown alarm continued to blare, and I sensed the temperature rising. Toxic fumes thickened. Soon, we would succumb if we didn't escape. Summoning my courage, I rolled out from cover, firing a concentrated burst at one of the guards. He toppled with a grunt, sparks dancing across his armor. Calder sprang forward, dispatching the second with a precision headshot. That left Jathir. He roared in fury, sending a barrage of shots our way. One of his bolts slammed into Calder's shoulder, spinning him around with a cry. I clenched my teeth, focusing on Jathir's muzzle flash, timing his next shot. I popped up and loosed a sizzling volley that hit him square in the chest. He stumbled, armor crackling. Enraged, he tore off his damaged helmet, revealing a twisted scowl. "You will pay for this, Maelis," he spat, voice trembling with hatred. I fired again, catching him in the side. With a guttural yell, he fell to one knee. Smoke poured from his armor. He glared at me with a hate so palpable it tightened my throat. gasping for breath. He muttered something about reactivating the turrets, but there was no time for further threats. Another violent tremor shook the complex, sending beams of metal crashing down. Realizing Jathir was incapacitated, I rushed to Calder, who clutched his wounded shoulder, blood staining his uniform. "Can you move?" I asked frantically. He nodded, wincing. "Barely. We have to." A groan of metal cut him off as the entire ceiling buckled. Flames and toxic gas roiled around us. Our only chance lay in the elevator shaft beyond the rubble. I threw Calder's arm over my shoulder, helping him stumble toward the door. Together, we reached the control panel. He hastily entered the meltdown override, but the entire system flickered erratically, on the verge of collapse. "Hang on," he muttered, forcing the doors open with a manual release lever. Behind them lay an old service platform, its power indicator flickering. We stepped onto it. Calder hit the activation switch, and with a groan, the platform began to ascend. We exchanged a breath of relief until the screech of metal signaled that debris had jammed part of the mechanism. The lift shuddered, ascending in fits and starts. I looked down to see if Jathir was pursuing, but the swirling smoke obscured everything. Flames and chemicals churned below, devouring the storage bay. Another quake rumbled, and a surge of heat blasted upward. My visor's temperature gauge blinked red. At last, the platform ground to a halt, only halfway to the next level. The overhead exit hatch was a few meters above. "I'll climb," I gasped. "I'll pull you up." Calder nodded, gritting his teeth. I scrambled up the side railing, ignoring the searing heat. Once I reached the top, I stretched a hand down, hooking my arm under his. Every muscle burned as I hauled him up. We tumbled onto the next level's floor, choking on the acrid fumes. "This way," I coughed, pointing to a corridor sign marked with an emergency exit symbol. We crawled, then staggered, through the corridor. Occasionally, the floor shook, threatening to buckle beneath us. Finally, we found a small access ladder leading upward, presumably back toward the temple, climbing rung by rung. We willed our exhausted bodies to cooperate. The meltdown's roar intensified, each tremor like a monstrous heartbeat. Toxic smoke billowed up the shaft, our vision blurred, eyes watering. My limbs screamed in protest, but we climbed relentlessly, driven by the primal urge to survive. At the top, we discovered a small hatch. I slammed a release lever, and the hatch opened to a wash of fresh air. Night had fallen outside, the sky ablaze with stars. We emerged in a secluded corner of the temple ruins, behind a fallen pillar. Both of us collapsed onto the stone floor, gasping for breath, hearts thundering. Below us, the black site roiled in final meltdown, its hidden atrocities consumed by a cataclysm of chemical neutralization. We had done it stopped the weapon, or so we hoped. Yet the cost weighed upon my soul. I had betrayed my commanding officer, fought against my own kin, and Calder lay wounded at my side, a living testament to the strange alliance we had forged. As the echoes of destruction rumbled beneath the earth, I sat up, scanning the star-lit jungle. The horizon glowed faintly from residual storms. My comm beeped, but I ignored it for now. Whatever High Command had to say, I was no longer sure I wanted to hear it. My priority was ensuring we both escaped this place alive, and possibly revealing the truth about the black site to the galaxy. Calder stirred, breathing heavily. "We did it," he whispered, half disbelieving. I gazed at him, the lines of exhaustion clear on his face. "Yes," I said quietly. "We did." We had emerged from the depths of a forgotten horror, united by necessity. Our old roles, hunter and hunted, had dissolved in the crucible of danger. In the smoldering aftermath, something new had formed, a fragile bond, tempered by shared sacrifice. And though our story was far from over, for that moment under the starlit canopy of Veridex, we allowed ourselves a shred of relief. Dawn broke soft and blue, casting long shadows across the ruins of the temple. Calder and I had taken shelter behind a broken column, bandaging his wounded shoulder and tending to the burns on my scales. The meltdown's final tremors had subsided in the night, leaving the underground facility sealed beneath rubble and chemical floods. Whether the entire weapon had been destroyed or simply rendered inert, we could only guess. Our situation was precarious. I had defied direct orders from high command, and at least one of their elite captains had been gravely injured, maybe killed during our escape. Even if I survived this ordeal, I would likely be labeled a traitor. Calder, on the other hand, was a wanted fugitive, guilty in their eyes of espionage and murder. Yet now we both stood on the same side of a moral line, having prevented a catastrophic threat. "What's the plan now?" he asked quietly, adjusting the improvised sling that cradled his injured arm. I stared at the temple's shattered doorway, thinking of all that had transpired. My people will send more forces soon, if they haven't already. Once they realize the meltdown was triggered, they'll be searching these ruins, he grimaced. So running isn't much of an option. I shook my head. They'll lock down the entire sector, maybe the entire moon. No ships in or out without their clearance. You might find a way to slip through, but it'll be risky. And me. Well, I doubt they'll welcome me back with open arms. His eyes met mine. Then why not come with me? I can't guarantee Earth's forces will be any friendlier, but at least we can reveal what happened here. Maybe that can protect you from your own people's retribution. A pang of uncertainty struck. My entire life had been shaped by duty to Auretia, a sense of belonging to something greater. The idea of turning my back on it all, seeking refuge with humans, it felt impossible. Yet the thought of returning to face a corrupt high command, who had sanctioned monstrous weapons, filled me with revulsion. Before I could answer, my comm crackled. I instinctively reached for the earpiece. Salir's voice flooded in, breathless and frantic. "Maelis, are you alive? We detected a meltdown in the temple facility. High command says you went rogue. What happened down there?" I clenched my jaw, noticing Calder tense. "I can't talk freely," I replied quietly. "I discovered things that you wouldn't believe. The black site was real, and the weapon was—" "They're calling you a traitor," Salir interrupted, voice thick with emotion. But I had to check. I needed to hear your side. "Are you safe?" My throat tightened. "I'm alive, yes, but I can't return to the fleet. Not yet." "Salir, you must believe me." The facility was a ticking time bomb that could have wiped out entire worlds. I had to stop it. A moment of silence crackled. I don't know what to say. "Maelis, they've dispatched more elite squads to your location. They'll be there by midday. If you don't surrender, they'll kill you on sight." Calder's gaze flicked to me, hearing Salir's words through the static. We both knew time was running out. I pressed a hand to my comm device, voice trembling with conviction. "Salir, you have to get the truth out. The black site was real. Make them see reason. If I can, I'll try to provide evidence." Salir exhaled shakily. "I'll do what I can from here. But be careful. And Maelis, whatever happens, I'm sorry." The channel clicked off. I stood there, the silent echo of Salir's words swirling in my mind. "They'll be here soon," I murmured. Calder wrapped his good hand around his rifle. "Then let's move." We made our way out of the temple ruins, navigating the sprawling roots and scattered debris. The early sunlight painted the jungle in shades of green and gold, masking the lethal dangers that lurked within. Every rustle of leaves set my nerves on edge, expecting an ambush at any moment. After hours of trudging through dense vegetation, we reached a vantage point atop a rocky ridge. From there, we could see the horizon, a vast canopy, broken only by distant mountain ranges. My visor detected faint heat signatures in the sky, likely dropships or patrol craft. They would be scanning for us. Calder squinted at the shapes in the distance. We can't outrun them. If we try, we'll be gunned down or cornered. I nodded grimly. There might be another way. A friend told me about old smuggler paths that crisscross Veridex. Some lead to hidden coves along the coastline, where small craft can lie low. If we can find one of those coves, we might escape via a stealth shuttle. His expression brightened slightly. That's our best bet. We need to get off this moon and broadcast the truth. Yet a nagging thought tugged at me. Even if we escape, the High Command will spin their story. They'll call me a renegade. You, a saboteur. They'll bury the truth under propaganda. Calder slung his rifle carefully across his back. Then we have to make sure the proof is undeniable. That meltdown you triggered, someone must have recorded the real readings, the real transmissions. If we can find those data logs, or any survivor from the Black Site staff, we might have enough evidence. I glanced at the sky again, dread pooling in my stomach. We can't go back down there now. Everything is destroyed. If there are any external logs, they might be held at an off-site command center, but we don't have time to search. The squads are closing in. He patted the small interface device where the meltdown code still resided. At least I can show them the override logs. Prove the Arretians built that facility. It's partial evidence, but combined with any eyewitness accounts from the outpost, it might suffice. It's a start, I agreed, not entirely convinced. Let's find that cove. We descended the ridge quickly, forging eastward through the jungle. My mind churned with worry, replaying Salir's warning about the elite squads. Every rustling branch could herald their arrival. Calder and I pushed ourselves to the limit, determined to stay ahead of our pursuers. Suddenly, a shrill cry echoed from overhead. We froze. Above the canopy, a sleek dropship swooped low, scanning the treetops with a bright searchlight. My visor beeped an alert. Our energy signatures might have been detected. We rushed to take cover under a dense tangle of vines. The dropship hovered, passing slowly. My heart thumped as I waited for the hail of gunfire. But after a few tense minutes, the aircraft moved on, continuing its search pattern. We exhaled in relief. We can't risk open ground, Calder muttered. We'll have to stay beneath the trees. We pressed on, aided by glimpses of topographical data on my visor. According to legend, the Smuggler's Cove was nestled near a set of basalt cliffs on Veridex's southeastern coast. The trek would take at least another day. We had to hope the squads wouldn't lock down that region first. As dusk fell, the jungle's shadows thickened. We found a secluded hollow beneath a fallen tree to camp. Hunger gnawed at us, but rations were low. Calder shared a small packet of Terran dried protein, and I offered him some Arretian nutrient paste. The meal was pitiful, but our fatigue overshadowed any concern for taste. In the half-light of the dying sun, we spoke in hushed tones. "What will you do if we actually make it off this moon?" Calder asked, glancing up at the star-flecked sky. I stared at the red glow on the horizon, where the twin suns had set. I don't know. I've lived my life by the High Command's rules, believing I was protecting my people. Now I'm an outcast, a traitor in their eyes. Maybe I'll find some corner of the galaxy to hide in, or maybe I'll join your fight, help expose their secrets. He nodded thoughtfully. We need someone like you, someone who's seen the truth. Who knows how they operate? The galaxy can't remain blind. to what your high command was willing to do. Silence stretched between us. Words of encouragement felt hollow after all we had endured. Finally, we settled down to rest, taking turns on watch. Our uneasy alliance had become something closer to camaraderie, built on mutual respect and shared sacrifice. But uncertainty loomed like a dark cloud, ready to sweep us away at any moment. Sleep was restless. My dreams were haunted by images of the meltdown, the turrets firing, Jathir's enraged face. Beneath it all, a creeping sense of fear that we might fail at the final hurdle, that all our efforts would be erased. Yet I also felt a spark of hope. Perhaps this fragile bond between a lone human soldier and a renegade Areshan tracker could tip the scales. We had, after all, overcome every snare set before us. If fate willed it, we might just see the dawn of a new chapter for ourselves and for the galaxy that trembled on the brink of the unknown. Dawn arrived with a chorus of unseen creatures stirring in the canopy overhead. Calder and I rose, gathering our meager supplies. A gentle breeze rustled through the leaves, carrying the damp scent of moss and water. We pressed southeast, guided by my visor's half-scrambled terrain maps. Despite the best efforts of the squads to sweep the jungle, we'd managed to stay one step ahead so far. By mid-morning, we heard the roaring of a waterfall in the distance. The basalt cliffs must be near. We quickened our pace, each step a careful dance around tangled roots and hidden puddles of acidic rainwater. Occasionally, we spotted fresh footprints belonging to Areshan soldiers. My tail lashed nervously. We were no longer alone in these woods. At last, we emerged onto a rocky ledge overlooking a wide river that cascaded into a deep gorge below. The basalt cliffs rose on the opposite side, dark and foreboding, but offering potential shelter. A stone pathway, slick with mist, wound down to the river's edge. Calder gestured to the far side. We crossed there, follow the gorge a few kilometers, then we should reach the cove. I scanned the surroundings. A swirling mist rose from the waterfall's base, drifting across the gorge. Dense foliage clung to the cliffs, forming natural steps of mossy rock. It looked treacherous, but passable if we were careful. The question remained, were we alone? Let's move, I said, voice taut. We descended the stone pathway, water splashing underfoot. Mist caressed our faces. The thunderous roar of the falls drowned out any subtle sounds, setting my nerves on edge. Reaching the river's edge, we found a narrow, rocky crossing. Calder stepped onto the slick stones, testing his footing. A spray of water drenched his legs. I followed close behind, rifle braced. The roar of the falls was disorienting, a pounding echo that filled my skull. Halfway across, I felt a prickling sensation on my neck, the intangible sense of being watched. I whirled, scanning the cliffside. Through the haze, a flash of movement caught my eye. Too late. The sharp whine of energy bolts sliced through the roar of the water. "Down!" I yelled, tackling Calder. We tumbled onto the stones, a barrage of shots exploding around us. Steam hissed as bolts hit the water, sending up columns of hot vapor. A glance upward confirmed my fear. Areshan squads perched on the cliff, weapons trained on us. We scrambled behind a boulder, hearts pounding. My visor identified multiple heat signatures. This was no mere patrol, at least 8 or 9 well-armed soldiers, possibly more lurking unseen. They had the high ground, and we were pinned on the slippery river crossing. "Return fire!" Calder shouted, bracing his rifle on a rock. He squeezed off a volley, forcing the snipers to duck. I followed suit, sending bursts of energy into the swirling mist. The advantage was theirs, but we fought back with desperate fury. The stone at our backs cracked with the impact of repeated shots. We couldn't stay pinned forever. Slowly, I edged around the boulder, scanning for an escape route. The far side of the river was only a dozen meters away, but crossing under this hail of fire seemed impossible. A sudden, shrill voice boomed over loudspeakers. "This is Lieutenant Orani of the Eretion Elite. Maelis, surrender now. You are outnumbered. The High Command has authorized lethal force." My stomach churned. I recognized that name, Orani, an up-and-coming officer known for her ruthless efficiency. The bolts continued to slam into the boulder, chipping off shards of stone. Water splashed with each near miss. Calder locked eyes with me, his face taut. "We can't let them pin us here. If we stay, we die." I nodded, my mind racing. We need a diversion, something to obscure their sightlines. The mist from the waterfall isn't enough. He rummaged in his pack, pulling out 2 small grenades. Smoke grenades, Terran issue. Not exactly standard in Eretion engagements, but they might help. I eyed them warily. It's our best shot. On my signal, Calder lobbed the grenades toward the cliffside. Within seconds, thick plumes of dark smoke billowed out, mingling with the natural mist. The waterfall's spray carried it upward, creating a dense cloud that obscured the shooter's view. "Go!" I shouted over the noise, helping Calder to his feet. We dashed across the remaining stones, slipping and nearly tumbling into the raging water. Bolts of energy stabbed blindly through the smoke, sizzling in the air. One whizzed past my tail, singing the tip. I bit back a curse, adrenaline surging. At last, we reached the riverbank on the far side, taking cover behind a cluster of large rocks. The smoke continued to swirl behind us, but we knew it wouldn't last long. We followed the bank downstream, half running, half stumbling over mossy stones. Above, we heard the frantic cries of the squads, disoriented by the smoke. Cutting into a dense stand of trees, we tried to put as much distance as possible between ourselves and our pursuers. Twisting vines and thick undergrowth hindered our progress, but also provided cover. My visor pinged with intermittent scans, indicating multiple life forms scattered across the region. After an exhausting scramble, we paused to catch our breath, chests heaving. Blood trickled from a graze on Calder's arm, and I felt a searing line across my thigh where a shot had grazed me. But we were alive and still free. For the moment, "We can't keep this up," he panted. "They'll hound us to the ends of Veridex." My gaze swept the forest, searching for the basalt cliffs. We're close to the cove. If we can slip past their perimeter, a rustle behind us. We spun, weapons raised. 2 Eretion soldiers burst through the brush, rifles aimed. Everything slowed as I recognized one of them, Salir, my handler, the friend who had spoken to me on comms. His eyes widened at the sight of us. "Maelis," he choked, weapon trembling. We locked gazes. I saw indecision warring on his face. The other soldier, a stern-faced woman with a scar across her snout, barked, "Surrender now!" My heart hammered. Could Salir help us? Or would he follow protocol and detain me? "Salir," one whispered, "we're trying to stop a bigger threat. You know me. You know I wouldn't betray Eretia unless it was the only way." His eyes flicked to the other soldier, who tightened her grip on the rifle. Time froze in that tense standoff. Finally, in a trembling voice, he spoke, "Sergeant, hold your fire." "What?" she hissed, baffled. "We have orders." He took a step forward, arms raised to show no threat. "Yes, but I can't kill Maelis. She's not the traitor High Command says she is. She uncovered the truth about the black site. Didn't you see the meltdown? The data. The lab was real." The scarred soldier's eyes narrowed. "We have our orders. The High Command, Salir's voice rose with uncharacteristic conviction. The High Command lied. They allowed that abomination to fester beneath our temple. They wanted to harness it, use it. Maelis saved us all from a potential war. He turned to me, desperation shining in his eyes. Is that not true? Maelis. Emotion choked my throat. Yes, it's true. We neutralized the weapon, and now they want to silence us. A flicker of doubt crossed the scarred soldier's face. She glanced at Salir, then at me, uncertain. Calder stood tense beside me, weapon half raised. The entire jungle seemed to hold its breath. Finally, she lowered her rifle, confusion clear in her eyes. I don't know what's right anymore. Relief flooded me, though I knew we weren't safe yet. If you believe what Salir said, I murmured, then let us go. We're trying to escape this moon and expose the truth. Salir hesitated, conflict etched on his features. I can't come with you, Maelis, but maybe I can cover your escape, draw off the others. He looked at the scarred soldier, swallowing. Sergeant, if we're quick, we can lead the squads away. Make them think we're chasing them in another direction. She nodded slowly, as if the weight of her choice settled like a stone. Go. We never saw you, and you never saw us. Emotion burned behind my eyes. Thank you, Salir. You may never be honored for this, but know you did the right thing, he swallowed, nodding rapidly. Just live and show them the truth. Without another word, he turned, beckoning the soldier to follow, and the pair disappeared into the undergrowth. Calder and I stood for a moment, stunned by our narrow brush with disaster and by Salir's selfless act. A swirl of gratefulness and sorrow coursed through me. We had gained precious time, but at what cost to Salir? Would he face punishment for his defiance? Could he sway more hearts? A distant shout reminded me we still had a mission. I glanced at Calder, who offered a silent nod. We resumed our trek, forging toward the cliffs and the rumored smuggler's cove. My mind replayed the moment of Salir's intervention, the flash of understanding in his eyes. Perhaps not all of my people were blind followers of the High Command's lies. There was hope, faint though it was. Step by step, we inched closer to freedom, carrying the weight of revelations that could change the galaxy or condemn us forever. And though the enemy still hunted us, we pressed on, buoyed by a single, unbreakable truth. We were doing what was right. The landscape transformed as we neared the southeastern coast of Veridex. The dense jungle gave way to swaying ferns and stony outcroppings, the ground sloping downward toward the sea. The air grew heavier with the tang of salt. Through breaks in the foliage, we glimpsed the ocean, a vast, shimmering expanse under the mid-afternoon suns. Calder and I trudged onward, exhaustion dragging at our limbs. The skirmishes, the chase, the meltdown, each had taken its toll. My thigh still throbbed from the earlier graze, and Calder's shoulder wound remained a hindrance. Yet hope flickered as we realized we might soon find the smuggler's cove. Legend said the cove was hidden behind a natural rock formation, accessible only at low tide. If a smuggler's craft was moored there, we could use it to slip past the blockade. It was a desperate gamble, one that might rely on ancient rumors. But we had no other options. By late afternoon, we reached a jagged cliff overlooking the sea. The tide was receding, exposing a rocky beach strewn with kelp like algae. The surf crashed against basalt columns, sending spray high into the air. I scanned the horizon, seeing no ships, Areshan or otherwise. This way, Calder murmured, pointing to a narrow trail winding down. We descended carefully, mindful of loose rocks that threatened to tumble into the surf below. The roar of the ocean filled our ears, an all-encompassing chorus that mingled with the pounding of our hearts. At the base of the cliff, we found a small inlet, almost invisible from above. Towering basalt spires formed a natural arch, beyond which a hidden lagoon stretched. Pale sand lined the water's edge, and in the lagoon's center, moored to a makeshift dock of driftwood and vines, floated a battered shuttle. My spirits soared at the sight. Thank the stars, I breathed. The vessel was old and rust-streaked, possibly an older model of Aretian or Terran origin. But if it had a functional engine, that was enough. We approached cautiously, weapons drawn. No sign of people. The shuttle's loading ramp was partially lowered, revealing a dimly lit interior. We might not be alone, Calder warned. We boarded slowly, checking corners. Inside, we found stacked crates labeled in various alphabets, evidence of illicit trade. But no crew. It's deserted, I whispered, relief coursing through me. Perhaps the smugglers had abandoned it during an earlier sweep. The interior smelled musty, the floor littered with empty rations. Spiders scurried away from our footsteps. Calder made his way to the cockpit, checking the controls. Lights flickered weakly when he powered them. "It's not in great shape," he said, frowning. "But I think I can jury-rig the engines. We'll need fuel, there's a pump system here. But I don't know if it still works." I began rummaging through supply lockers in the main cabin. Mostly contraband, various narcotics, weapons, and stolen artifacts. Finally, I found a dusty canister labeled in an old Terran dialect. Fuel reserve, perhaps. Will this help? Calder's eyes lit up as he examined it. Yes, this should be enough for a short jump. We just need to get off the moon and away from the blockade. Then I can transmit a request for exfil to my contacts. We got to work. Time was short, and we both knew the squads could track us here any moment. Calder hobbled around the craft, draining the canister into the shuttle's fuel intake. I verified the engine couplings, using my visor's scanning function to identify any critical damage. The craft hissed and groaned, protesting its reactivation after likely months of neglect. At last, the instruments lit up, albeit dimly. Calder settled into the pilot's seat, running pre-flight checks. I stood behind him, my tail swishing with mounting anxiety. "How long?" I asked. He grunted. "We can take off in about 10 minutes, give or take. We'll want to do it at high tide to help with the water depth. The only question is whether we can outrun any patrol ships." I placed a hand on the cockpit's metal frame, feeling the vibrations of the sputtering power core. It's our best chance. Suddenly, my visor alerted me to approaching heat signatures. A wave of dread washed over me. Through the cockpit windows, I saw shapes moving along the beach. Aretian soldiers, at least a squad of 5, scanning the area with rifles raised. The lead figure wore lieutenant's stripes. Orani, no doubt. "They're here," I muttered, heart pounding. Calder's jaw clenched. We were so close to escape, yet pinned again. The shuttle's ramp was still lowered, giving them a direct path inside. A new wave of adrenaline flooded me. "Start the engines. I'll hold them off long enough for us to lift." Calder's eyes snapped to mine. "Maelis, there are too many. You can't. I've come this far," I growled, gripping my rifle. "Go!" Without waiting for a response, I sprinted down the corridor, ignoring the protest of my injuries. The ramp's hydraulics hissed as I neared. I pressed the control panel to seal it, but not before stepping onto the sand. Waves lapped at the shore, reflecting the twilight sky. Lieutenant Orani spotted me at once, her rifle swinging up. "Cease and desist, traitor!" she shouted, voice amplified by an external comm. "Surrender, or die here." I dropped to one knee behind a crate, returning fire. My shots forced her squad to scatter behind boulders. Hot bolts of energy crisscrossed the beach, illuminating the dusk in flashes of orange and blue. Behind me, I heard the shuttle's engines sputter to life, drowning out the roar of the surf. This was my final stand. I had to buy Calder enough time. One soldier rushed forward, trying to flank me. I pivoted, landing a direct shot. He collapsed with a grunt. Another lobbed a pulse grenade, which exploded behind me, peppering my back with sand and debris. Pain flared, but I gritted my teeth, refusing to yield. Orani advanced, using a fallen log for cover. She barked orders at her remaining soldiers, coordinating a pincer movement. Sweat trickled down my brow. They're circling me. I fired relentlessly, forcing them to keep their heads down. But my rifle's energy meter blinked red, running dangerously low. Suddenly, a flash of movement at my flank. Too late, I turned. The butt of an Oreshan rifle slammed into my ribs. I gasped, doubling over. A soldier pinned me down, pressing a boot to my chest. Orani stepped forward, muzzle aimed at my head. For a moment, time froze, her stern visage etched with triumph. A thunderous roar shook the beach, the shuttle's engines at full power. I heard the hiss of hydraulics as the ramp began to close. Orani's gaze flicked toward the craft. "No, stop them," she screamed at her soldiers. But they were too far, out of position. The shuttle lifted, kicking up a spray of sand and salt water. Seizing the moment, I twisted beneath the soldier's boot, slamming my tail into his leg. He stumbled, and I sprang up, ripping his rifle away. With a swift strike, I knocked him out cold. Orani whirled back to me, but I was already swinging the rifle butt at her head. She ducked, narrowly avoiding the blow, and retaliated with a savage kick that caught my thigh. Pain flared, dropping me to one knee. Desperate, I raised the rifle to fire. She was faster, slamming her fist into the weapon, causing the bolt to discharge wildly. The energy seared a chunk of sand mere inches away, sending steam and debris into the air. Orani grabbed me by the collar, fury twisting her features. "You'll pay for your treason," she hissed. Behind her, the shuttle angled upward, thrusters blazing. Calder hovered mere meters off the beach. The force of the engines battered us with a gale of hot wind. In a surge of will, I mustered the last of my strength. I twisted out of Orani's grip and smashed the rifle across her midsection. She staggered, eyes bulging in shock, summoning a final burst of energy. I sprinted toward the shuttle. The ramp was partly open, a rope line dangling from the hull. Without hesitation, I leaped, grabbing hold of the rope as the craft ascended. Bullets and energy bolts whizzed around me. Orani's furious scream echoed across the shore. I clung to the rope, heart hammering in my ears. Slowly, the shuttle rose higher, the beach shrinking below. The soldiers took potshots, but the craft's altitude put us out of effective range. I hauled myself onto the ramp, collapsing in a panting heap. Calder's voice cracked over the intercom. "Are you on board?" I coughed, tasting blood. "Yes. Punch it. Go." With a roar, the shuttle banked eastward, soaring above Veridex's emerald canopy. I stared through the open ramp, glimpsing the ocean and the cove receding into the distance. My muscles burned, my wounds screamed, but I was alive and free. The ramp sealed shut. A wave of dizziness washed over me. Through a haze, I saw Calder stagger toward me from the cockpit, relief etched on his face. He helped me to a seat, pulling the harness over my shoulders. "Hold on," he said softly, wiping sweat from his brow. "We're not safe yet." I nodded weakly, eyes slipping shut. The shuttle rumbled beneath me, engines straining as it climbed. Over the hum, I could faintly hear the beep of a navigation console. the hiss of atmospheric friction. Dimly, I realized we were ascending through Veridex's cloud layer, heading for the stars and possibly the blockade. But at that moment, all I cared about was the fact that we had escaped the planet's grip together. I woke to the sound of alarms blaring in the cockpit. My entire body ached, battered by the confrontation on the beach. Calder stood at the pilot's console, cursing under his breath. Through the viewport, I saw the star-studded void of space, with Veridex's green orb dwindling behind us. But ahead, shapes loomed Areshan warships in formation. "They're hailing us," Calder muttered, flipping switches. "We can't outrun them in this clunker. They'll intercept us if we try." My heart sank. "So we're trapped again," he shook his head. "Maybe not. I can attempt a micro-jump risk a short hyperspace burst. But the shuttle's nav systems are ancient. We might end up in the wrong quadrant, or tear the ship apart." I limped closer, wincing at the pain in my side. If we stay, we die. If we jump, we might live. Grim logic. With no time to weigh better options, we prepared for the jump. Calder input a set of coordinates roughly in the direction of Terran space. The ship's engines whined in protest as he diverted power to the hyperdrive. Outside the viewport, I saw the flash of thrusters as a blockade frigate moved to intercept, flanked by smaller fighter craft. Warnings blipped on the console. They were charging weapons. My scales tingled with fear. "Now or never," Calder hissed, slamming the hyperdrive lever forward. A deafening roar filled the dock cabin, and the stars outside elongated into streaks of white. For a heart-stopping moment, the ship shuddered, the hull groaning as if about to tear apart. My stomach lurched, dizziness flooding my senses. Then, with a thunderous crack, we snapped into hyperspace. The swirling blue tunnel enveloped us, flickering with unstable pulses. I clutched the seat, breath held, as the battered shuttle rattled and shook. Warning lights flared, indicating system overloads and hull stress. "Hold together, girl," Calder murmured, patting the console. Just a few more seconds, another violent jolt. The lights flickered, then stabilized. The hyperdrive whine lowered to a ragged hum. We were in transit, albeit barely. Relief burst in my chest. But it was laced with fear. Would we survive the jump? For agonizing minutes, we drifted in the swirling tunnel, the drive groaning under the strain. Finally, with a crack like thunder, the ship lurched again, emerging into real space. My visor took a moment to recalibrate. Outside the viewport, I saw the vast emptiness of stars. No sign of the blockade or Veridex. Calder exhaled, shoulders sagging. We made it. Not sure where we are exactly, but we're free from the blockade. Emotions swelled in my chest. After everything, the meltdown, the squads, the ambush on the beach we had escaped, I slumped into the co-pilot seat, letting the gravity of our ordeal wash over me. As the ship's system settled, Calder ran a quick scan. Coordinates place us in the uncharted perimeter near the border of Terran space. We're a few jumps away from any major port. The shuttle's in rough shape, but we might be able to limp to a friendly station. I closed my eyes, tears stinging unbidden. So much had changed in so little time. I was no longer an elite striker of the Areshan fleet, but a fugitive, allied with a human I once sought to kill. Together, we carried the truth of a monstrous secret facility. Our path ahead was filled with uncertainty, yet we were alive, and we possessed evidence that could expose the High Command's deceit. "Maelis," Calder said gently, "I don't know what the future holds, but I'm glad you chose to do the right thing." I swallowed hard. I only did what had to be done. If we hadn't, who knows what horrors would have been unleashed. A silence enveloped us, broken only by the hiss of the shuttle's life support. At length, I mustered a faint smile. "Thank you for not leaving me behind." On the beach, he gave a tired chuckle. "We're partners in crime now. Couldn't do it without you." Despite the pain, I let out a small laugh. A wave of warmth pulsed through me, a sense of camaraderie I'd never felt before. For the first time since setting foot on Veridex, I felt something akin to peace. Days passed as we coaxed the shuttle through the fringe of Terran space. We stopped at out-of-the-way refueling depots, trading contraband we found on board for supplies and minor repairs. Calder used coded channels to reach out to a few trusted contacts, Terran officials, who might help us reveal the existence of the black site without triggering a diplomatic firestorm. My injuries healed slowly. Aided by Medgel, Calder's shoulder remained stiff, but each day he regained a bit more strength. We faced near constant threats: suspicious pirates, local warlords, bounty hunters, alerted by the Eretion High Command's messages. But with cunning and luck, we evaded capture. At last, we arrived at a modest Terran station orbiting a gas giant. Calder's contact, a grizzled officer named Commander Rhys, greeted us with wary curiosity. We spent hours presenting our evidence, what remained of the meltdown override logs, personal testimonies, and battered recordings from the black site. Rhodes listened with stony silence, then excused himself to make secure calls. The wait was agonizing. If Rhodes refused to believe us, or if Earth's leadership chose to ignore the revelations, everything we'd sacrificed would be in vain. But I saw in Rhodes's eyes a glimmer of recognition, a veteran who'd witnessed too many horrors to dismiss a genuine threat lightly. When he returned, he wore a somber expression. "Our higher-ups want more proof," he said gravely, "but they're willing to grant you temporary asylum, pending a full investigation. We'll provide you with safe passage and a platform to speak." Relief flooded me, tears pricking my eyes. For so long, I had been the hunter, the predator. Now I was a wanderer in search of justice. Calder clapped me on the shoulder, smiling. "That's a start." In the weeks that followed, we worked alongside Terran officials, building a case to present before the Galactic Council. New evidence surfaced: old Eretion logs from decades past, testimonies from ex-researchers who dared to speak. A network of whistleblowers rallied to our cause. Step by step, the truth emerged. Meanwhile, factions within Eretia itself began to question the High Command's motives. Salir sent covert messages, hinting that cracks were forming in the leadership. Some demanded an explanation for the meltdown on Veridex. Others whispered of a power struggle, old secrets unraveling. And through it all, Calder and I grew closer, bound by shared trials. Our differences, once stark, became points of mutual respect. He taught me Terran phrases and jokes, while I revealed the nuances of Eretion culture. We argued, debated, and laughed in equal measure. The huntsman-prey dynamic had long since faded, replaced by something resembling genuine friendship, perhaps more, though we dared not name it in those turbulent times. In the end, our efforts bore fruit. A crucial hearing took place on a neutral station. Delegates from various species assembled to assess the evidence. Calder and I spoke before them, recounting the horrors of Veridex's black site. We shared data logs, meltdown overrides, the story of how we nearly perished to prevent a galactic catastrophe. Though some Eretion representatives dismissed us as traitors and liars, enough voices rose in support to spark an official inquiry. With mounting pressure from the Galactic Council, Eretion leadership was forced to concede the existence of the clandestine facility. Public outcry rippled through the empire. Reformists seized the momentum, challenging the old guard who authorized such atrocities. Though it would take time for justice to fully unfold, a revolution of truth had begun. Throughout the turmoil, I remained at Calder's side, forging a path I could never have imagined when I first landed on Veridex to hunt him. In time, we were recognized not as criminals, but as heroes, unlikely allies who risked everything to avert a war. The tension between our peoples did not vanish overnight, but a new dialogue opened, paving the way for a fragile peace. And in that space, we found our place not as predator and prey, but as partners in a cause far greater than ourselves. At last, on a quiet morning in the Terran capital city, with the rising sun casting golden light across the spires, I stood beside Calder on a balcony overlooking the bustling streets. Below us, humans and Aretians alike milled about, uncertain but hopeful. The air was crisp, filled with the promise of change. Calder slipped his hand into mine. I glanced at him, warmth blooming in my chest. We had survived the jungle, faced down an empire's wrath, and exposed a secret that could have doomed countless lives. Now, we stood on the threshold of a new era, one of cautious optimism. Strange how life turns out, he mused, gazing at the sunrise. A few weeks ago, we were trying to kill each other on Veridex. I laughed softly, leaning my head against his uninjured shoulder. And now look at us, allies, or maybe more than that. A gentle breeze rustled our hair. The city below woke to a new day, a chance for redemption. We had come from darkness and emerged into light. Whatever the future held, we would face it together, bound by our shared history and the unbreakable bond forged in the depths of Veridex's lethal jungle. And so our story ended not in bloodshed and betrayal, but in the hope of a better tomorrow. For though the galaxy remains vast and filled with dangers, the spark of unity can outshine even the deepest shadows. If only we dare to embrace it.